All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming this morning, this afternoon, or this evening, wherever you're joining us from. My name's Kristin Roth, and I'm an Associate Director of Admissions at Tuck. And today we're going to talk about what makes applicants successful in the admissions process. And while everyone has a different path and a different story, we don't expect people to all be the same. There are some common traits that we see in successful applicants, and so that's what we're going to share with you today. I'm going to do a short presentation, and then we're going to open it up to your questions that you can type in, and I will try and answer to the extent possible. First, let's get started. I want to ask a quick question of those of you who are joining us right now is, have you thought about when you plan to apply? So right now, I'm sharing with you a poll. And if you could enter your results on when you're thinking of applying, we'll leave this open for a little bit just to help us understand who our audience is. Great, I'm seeing some good results here. We've got, most of you have voted. Thank you so much. This is great and helpful information for us. All right, I'm going to close our poll in about 10 more seconds. So if you are planning to reply, if you can do that, we would appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, great. Thank you so much for your answers. And it looks like a lot of you are planning to apply this year, which is, most of you are planning to apply this year. So some of this information is going to be helpful as you're thinking about putting the final touches on your application for November, or as you're really delving into the meat of your application for January. There's a lot that you have to consider. Hopefully much of it you have already thought through, but we will help you think through a little bit more of that today. All right. So let's look at what are those tips for successful applicants. So we're going to share 7 things that we find in successful applicants, and I'm going to talk about each one of these one at a time and go into a little bit more depth. But the basics are, you need to be prepared, you need to know yourself, you need to demonstrate success as a leader and a team member. Be sure to focus only on things that are in your control, because there's so much we don't control. Own your passions, and I'll talk a little bit more about that and what that means in a bit. Show your enthusiasm and your authentic self, and tell us your story in a clear and consistent manner. All right, so first things first, let's talk about being prepared. This is key, and if you spend most of your time on the preparation, that is going to serve you well throughout the admissions process. It's really key to the whole process. You need to take the time to know yourself, understand and think through and be able to articulate what your motivations are. Why do you want an MBA? Have you really thought about that? Beyond just, well, everybody around me has an MBA, or that's what I see people doing. Why is it that you want an MBA? Well, how is that going to serve you? And that leads into thinking about, what are your goals? What do you want to do with that MBA? It's not just to get the degree, but what is that degree going to give you? And thinking about that. One of the most important questions I think people can have an answer to, at least for themselves, even if no one ever asks them this during the process, is, why is now the right time for your MBA? Thinking about, is this the right time? And why does this make sense right now? And one of the things that this goes into motivations, but it's important to think about as well, is what are your passions? What excites you? When you think about the MBA process, you need to think about how this fits into your passions. And we're going to talk a little bit more about own your passions later. One of the other things you can do to be prepared is to know the schools and the programs that you're interested in. There are a lot of similarities between top-tier programs. You know, we're all looking for accomplishment, both academic and professional. We're all looking for people who have the ability to succeed and be leaders. But there's also some things that set schools apart. And have you done your research to understand what those things are? It's important to attend recruiting events and visit campus and learn more about the school itself, talking to people who went to the school. And again, we're going to talk more about being prepared in a little bit and how you can learn more about schools, but this is important. These are important questions to think about. And one of the most important things I say, just for a peace of mind standpoint, is get stuff done and out of the way early if you can. So for those of you who are applying in November, gosh, I hope you've taken your standardized tests already and are happy with your scores. Because when you apply, you need to have that standardized test. And there's no guarantee that anything you take later will be part of your application. We promise to read the application you submit on the deadline. We cannot promise that materials submitted after the deadline will be able to be considered. So we will try, but we can't guarantee it. So that's something to keep in mind. The other thing to keep in mind is that if you are, say, applying for January and you are not happy with your scores, you think you can submit a stronger application, you have limited time to address that now. So you want to get that moving if you think you need to submit a stronger score, or you can do better than what it indicates. Okay, so let's move on. Know yourself. This is an important piece as well. This goes really into the first part of what I said on being prepared. We're going to go into a little bit more depth. Self-awareness, especially at a place like Tuck, is really important. We are looking for people who understand who they are. When you look at the mission of Tuck, educating wise leaders to better the world of business, and we talk about the three qualities that really develop that wise leadership: empathy, judgment, and confident humility. You can't have any of those things if you don't know who you are and what your strengths and weaknesses are. So we are looking for people who understand that. Do you understand where you want to go, what your goals are, and what you need to accomplish those goals? Do you also understand what a school or an MBA program can do for you in order to reach those goals? Think about what you bring to a school and what you offer to their community. You can learn more about MBA programs and what you can offer by attending events, by doing informational interviews with students or alumni, and by researching career paths in schools, so you can understand a little bit more about how an MBA program fits into what you're looking to do. And all of this preparation is geared towards giving you the ability to narrate and tell your story better. You need to be able to tell your story. That's what we really are talking about here. Okay, so moving along, one of the things we do look for is, have you demonstrated success as a leader and as a team member? There's a time for everything, and there's a time to lead, and there's a time to follow. An MBA will help you develop your leadership skills, but especially at a place like Tuck, it will also help you develop your collaboration skills. We are looking for people who understand when it's important to step up and when it's important to defer, when it's important to contribute to the team and when it's important to lead the team. So these are important things that you want to consider. You can show this through various areas, particularly through your work experience and through your extracurricular experience or your community involvement, both now and during university or your undergraduate experience. One of the things I want to highlight is you don't need to specifically have the title, the leadership title, either in the organization you're working in or in your job. That doesn't have to be part of it. Leadership can come in informal ways. So you want to show that you've taken steps to challenge, to question, to better a process, to lead from within or lead from behind, to lead by example. So there's a lot of different ways you can show that leadership. What we are looking for is to understand what your work was, what the challenge was that you addressed in your work, what's your impact, and what's the progression you've taken in your work. So successful Tuck applicants, as you can see on the slide, they thrive in collaborative opportunities, they work collectively towards a goal, and they challenge themselves. So those are some of the things you can show us in your work experience, in your community involvement. We are not just looking for what your responsibilities were. I did this spreadsheet. I managed 5 people. We want to know, what have you learned? How have you influenced? What is your legacy? What is different because you were in this organization? We are not looking for, and something I want to emphasize, we're not looking for people who are only from one sector or one industry or one career path. There are a multitude of ways you can contribute in the tech environment. There are a multitude of places that you can demonstrate that leadership and that ability to be a good team member. We are also not looking for an exact number of years of work experience or certain titles. We want some work experience. We do want you to understand how to apply the framework of the MBA education in a real life setting. We're going to give you experiential opportunities, but we also want to see that you've already gotten opportunities to think about how this learning would impact in a work environment. So remember that we're not just looking for what you did, but we also want to understand what the challenge, progression, impact was. Okay, so now let's look at, this is the hard part. You can only focus on things that are in your control. This is difficult, especially for us who are, those of us who are type A personalities. We want to be able to impact a lot of things and we want to be in control of a lot of things. You have to let go at some point. And in the admissions process, you can only control the strength of your application and the component parts of it. So take the time to submit a strong application. Take the time to think through all those components. Choose carefully who your recommenders are. Again, for those of you who are applying in November, this piece, hopefully you've done that. But this is a great time to follow up with your recommenders. Are they on track, and are they able to get those recommendations in on time? Have they got enough information? Be sure to thank them when they're done as well. But you control that piece. You also control the quality of how you've described your work experience. You control the quality of how you've described your community service or your involvement in community. Again, whether that's in your current community or as an undergraduate, you control that piece. If you're not applying yet, you're applying sometime in the future, this is a great opportunity to think about, are there things I want to be more involved in? Maybe I should take the plunge now and start to be involved so I can start to test some of my skills, think more about what I want to do, and also demonstrate my passions to the admissions committees. Again, we'll talk about passions in a little bit. Other components you control are the quality of your essays, the thoughtfulness of how you told your story. I mentioned this in the beginning. Again, we'll talk about this in a little bit as well, but you control that story and that narration and how you describe yourself and where you're going, what you want to do. So take the time on those things, your test scores. There are some things you can't control. You can't control the pool, the applicant pool that you're competing with, either their strength or their size. Every year, the applicant pool is different. Every round, the applicant pool is different. So all you can do is focus on getting your application to the strongest point you feel you can, hitting submit, and then letting go. You have to exercise patience once you hit submit. It's time to focus on other things. Relax. It's out there now. Trust the process. Trust the admissions committee. I have so much confidence in my colleagues here in admissions and the integrity that they bring to the process and the thoughtfulness with which we review applications. Trust that we know what we're doing at this point. You know when the deadline is for being notified of your admissions decision. Focus on other things at this point. Focus on the things that make you excited. Focus on your work. Focus on your friends and family. Focus on your activities, and let that piece go. We do mean, as I say at the bottom of the slide here, we do mean that it is a holistic process. It is not just one thing. So don't obsess about that one little piece that wasn't as perfect as you would have liked it to be. Get it to the point you can and let it go. And creating a great class is more art than science. If you were just your numbers, it'd be really, really easy to do the admissions process, but you're more than your numbers, and we know that. So trust the process and trust that we are going to look at everything. All right, I mentioned I would talk about this more, but let's talk about owning your passions. Hopefully you have found things that get you excited to get up in the morning. You have things that you want to do in life, whether that is in your work or in your community, and you've thought about how an MBA can help you do those things better and how they can take you into the future. be able to articulate those passions. Now, you might not have one all-consuming thing that you want to do. You might own a multitude of things you're excited about and interested in. That's okay. Be able to articulate that, though. And how does it tie into your goals and why you want an MBA? Explain the whys behind the whats, as I said. Think about the impact that your passions will have on your MBA and in the community of the MBA program that you're going to go. And then think about how you present those. What we're really looking for here is narrate your story. Help us understand who you are. And as you can see at the bottom, I said, we can tell when you're faking it. Don't be someone you're not. We want to know who you are, and authenticity is important. Be authentic. We cannot assess whether or not you're a good fit for us if you're not yourself. And honestly, it'll be harder for you to assess whether we're a good fit for you if you're not yourself. So be authentic and genuine. Fit means getting to know us and us getting to know you. Understanding yourself, we talked about that in the beginning, is going to help you understand whether or not your essays are articulating your real voice and showing who you are. Whether when you walk into the interview, you are being natural and being yourself as opposed to being someone you think we want you to be, sorry. Take the process seriously. This is an opportunity. We are lucky to have these incredible programs and incredible opportunities to develop ourselves. Treat it that way. So submit your best work and show your best professional self. Do remember, though, even though you want to take the process seriously, that does not mean you have to always be serious about it. Think about, again, who you are and what you want to do. And finally, tell your story in a clear and consistent manner. And what I mean by this is things should make sense in your story. That does not mean you have to have a linear progression. This led to this, that led to this, led to this. Sometimes you have an experience and it encourages you to pivot to another direction. What about that experience took you off course and made you go in a different direction? What did you learn from that experience? How does that tie into your ultimate goals? You should be able to connect the dots in your application. So what this does mean, though, is that the story you tell in your essays should be coherent and connected to the story you tell in your interview. Your letters of recommendation should be sharing a similar picture of who you are in many of ways. Now, you do not control your letters of recommendation. However, you do control who you ask, and you do control the opportunity to set the stage for them about why you are looking for an MBA and how that ties into your history, your career history, your work with that person, so they can have an opportunity to share that in their recommendation should they choose to. So the consistency, we want consistency in telling your story, or if there is an inconsistency, explain that. And you have an opportunity to do that in the optional essay. You have an opportunity to share that in the interview, but take that opportunity to do it. Okay, so if we go back to the beginning, I have talked about being prepared, knowing yourself, demonstrating success as a leader and a team member. We've focused only on things that you can control. We've talked about owning your passions, showing your enthusiasm and authentic self, and telling your story in a clear and consistent manner. Hopefully some of that has shown through. And now I want to open it up to your questions. What I'm happy to do is go through those questions and think about all the pieces of it. And let's see. So it's going to take a little bit while I read through your questions. When I'm ready to answer a question, I will read it out loud, and then I will go ahead and answer it. So please feel free to submit your questions in the process. Okay. So one question, the first question we have here is, as an international applicant, I want to understand how different are the two rounds, November and January, in terms of intake. All right, so let's talk about which round to apply in and how they're different. So at this point in our application process, we have left the November round, and that deadline is November 1st for your application. We have the January round, which is January 3rd, 2018. That's the deadline for that. And then we have the April round left, which is the April 4th, 2018 round. In addition, if you're applying through the consortium, there's the second round of consortium, and that deadline is January 5th, 2018. Now, which round do you apply in? Well, you apply in the round that you feel you are ready for. You apply in the earliest round where you feel you can submit a strong application. As an international student, there's no difference between an international student applying in a round versus a domestic student applying in a round. We admit strong applicants in every round, and every round is different. As I said before, you don't control the strength of the applicant pool, and you don't control the size of the applicant pool. But what you do control is the strength of your application. So be sure you turn in the strongest application you can as early as you can. Now, why do I say as early as you can? Because if you look at, it just makes sense when you think about it. In the earliest rounds, the applicant pool is at its smallest, and the number of seats in the class are at its largest. So you have the opportunity to, you're competing against fewer people, and there are more seats in the class. That being said, each round is also very competitive, and we can't compare round to round over year to year and say this one is always the one to apply. And you might find that the January round is more competitive than say the November round. It varies year to year. The important thing to remember is that we admit strong applicants, both U.S. citizens and international applicants, in every round. What you do want to make clear is that you are submitting your application and you understand why now is the right time for your MBA. You want to have that story clear, and you want to be able to share that with the admissions committee. So again, as an international applicant, both rounds we admit strong applicants. You want to submit as soon as you feel you can submit your strongest application. All right, I hope that was clear. And let's see, so the next question, let me see if I can expand this here so I can see a little bit more of your questions. Okay, how much is too much in regards to emailing or calling admissions people during the process? What a great question. So what is too much? It is very much a judgment call. Contact us when you have a question that needs to get answered. Certainly it's appropriate, always appropriate to be polite. You can send a thank you email if you have interviewed and you want to say thank you to the interviewer. You do not have to do anything beyond that. If you do have a question, you should contact our office. You can also, should there be a significant update to your application, for example, you've submitted your application and now you've got an unexpected promotion or an expected promotion, but it wasn't official before and now it is, and you want to let us know about it. That's a significant update. Go ahead and send that to us. And you can email us to let us know that. That way we can add it to your application fairly easily. Call us if you have a question that needs to be answered right away. You can contact our main number, and then they will either answer it themselves or send you on to the appropriate person on our staff to answer that question. Too much is when you're simply updating or contacting us because you want to have the opportunity to put yourself in front of us one more time. If there's not a clear reason or rationale for the contact, we're going to start to question whether or not you're exercising good judgment. And you always want to exercise good judgment in this process. So please remember to do that, to exercise that good judgment, to have a thoughtful reason for why you're contacting people and asking questions. Make sure you're not asking questions that are easy to answer if you just look at the website. So be sure, it makes sense. But sometimes things are unclear. You should not agonize over something. When in doubt, ask. And so that way you can concentrate on the things you need to. As I said, you need to exercise patience once you hit that submit button. And sometimes that means just getting something off your mind to make sure that you got it right. So absolutely, that is something that you can do. Okay, let's see what other questions we have. All right, so the next question is about applicant-initiated interviews. So if you know much about Tuck, you know that we have a unique interview policy. You do not have to wait for an invitation to interview. You can initiate your own interview as long as you're able to come to campus. And there are deadlines for each round, both for the application and for the applicant-initiated interview. And sometimes those deadlines are the same, and sometimes they are not. So it's important to check those deadlines. So the question here is, if a person not living in the Northeast is not able to get to Hanover for an applicant-initiated interview, is that looked on negatively in comparison to someone who has, with the same application, who has interviewed? So no, it's not. We understand that there are reasons sometimes why people cannot come to campus. And we ask you in the application itself, we ask you to tell us, have you interviewed? And if not, why were you not able to? And sometimes it's, work got in the way, and work does that sometimes. Sometimes there's an unexpected event that affects your ability to get here. Sometimes, you're doing something that may not allow you the budgetary or time luxury of being able to travel a lot. And so explain that to us. Sometimes you tried to get here and all the interview spots were booked up and you're on the wait list and you're hoping to get in, but at that point in time where you submit your application, you were not able to get that interview spot. Just explain it so we understand. The advantage of doing the applicant-initiated interview is the opportunity to take one hurdle in the process out of the admissions committee's hands. You don't have to wait for that invitation to interview. You can come tell your story yourself. And that can be a huge advantage if you want to help distinguish yourself in the pool. That being said, we still offer many opportunities to interview by invitation. So if you're unable to come to campus, just let us know what your rationale is. Submit that really strong application. Tell your story in a clear and consistent manner. Show who you are and be authentic. And hopefully all those strong aspects will shine through and you will be invited to interview. Okay, so let's keep moving to next questions. Okay, so there's a general question about certifications like the CFA or things like that. And does it strengthen your application or your resume, especially if you're changing industries, changing careers, pivoting? It's always helpful to include certifications, especially ones like CFA or CPA, where we can see your quantitative skills or other skills that might be relevant to the MBA curriculum. Does it help? It can help, and sometimes it makes no difference. It depends on what you've got. It's just helpful to understand your qualifications. Some people don't have those, but they're still very strong. Many people don't have professional qualifications like CFA, but they're still very strong applicants in other ways. The nice thing about, I'm going to use the CFA as an example simply because it's a common one. So the CFA is Certified Financial, oh, what's the A stand for? It's escaping me at the moment. But basically, it's a quantitative measure of some of your abilities. If you are someone who maybe in university you didn't have a quantitative major, or didn't take a lot of quantitative classes, a CFA can be helpful for us to understand that you're still able to master the quantitative rigor of an MBA experience because you've done the professional exams and the experience that are required for the CFA. So it's helpful. You do not have to have them, however. So what I would say is focus on what makes the best professional sense for you. The MBA admissions process is not a guarantee. You will continue working no matter what, most likely. So if the CFA makes sense for you professionally, then I would say, it makes sense for you to consider going for. If it's something that you are personally interested in because it's something that will lead you towards goals that you're excited about, again, maybe it makes sense for you to sit for the exams and to get the professional experience to gain your CFA charter, but it is not something that everyone has to have. So don't feel like if you don't have it, that's going to be a mark against you. It's not. It can be helpful, but it is not necessarily something that you have to have. Okay, so the next question is, I'm trying to figure out my fit with Tuck. What is Tuck most enthusiastic about in a student? And what are the major career paths post-Tuck? All right, let's talk about the first one first. What is my fit with Tuck? What is Tuck most enthusiastic about? We are most enthusiastic about applicants who are themselves and who bring something to the community. You know, we, as I mentioned earlier, our mission is to educate wise leaders to better the world of business. And that means leaders who are who show empathy, to understand others' experiences, to work across differences, who show judgment, to know when and how to take risks, and who show confident humility, to know what you know and know what you don't know. Now, what does that mean in terms of fit for Tuck, and how does a variety of different experiences play into that? For example, you will learn more from your classmates and the people in your study group than you likely will from the faculty member in front of you. Even though the faculty, you'll get a ton from them, you'll learn even more from the students around you because they have experience and a wide variety of levels of experience, and they're willing to share their experience. So in study group, you know, it'll be obvious in the first initial Fall A core courses, where they're rigorous quantitatively, and people with strong quantitative skills will shine in study group. That does not mean if you don't have strong quantitative skills, you don't have anything to add to study group. What that means is your time is coming. Now is your time to learn from those people. But then when it's 2 o'clock in the morning and you guys are trying to figure out some difficult problem and stress levels are rising, your leadership skills or your ability to empathize, your ability to inspire, then becomes more relevant and more important. I mean, those are always things we want to share, but when things are stressful, that's when they're most important. So everyone brings something. When it's time to create a slide deck, you know, your experience with PowerPoint and being thoughtful and how to craft a story is going to be compelling. And then you'll be able to partner with those people who know what the numbers mean to help tell the story with the numbers. Your job is not to do that for your team, but it's to help teach your team how to do that. So if you're the numbers person, explain what the numbers mean. If you're the story person, you're going to help tell the story with the numbers and help the team learn how to do all of that. So fit takes a variety of different forms. And if you listened carefully to my answer, hopefully what you heard is your willingness to share that with your team, to teach others, to learn from others. And that's that confident humility, to know that you have things to share and to be confident in sharing those. And then to also know when it's time for you to learn and that you don't have all the answers. And it's time for you to sit and think and ask important questions and learn more about the experience. So that's about fit. What I would say is the thing that is common across Tuck students is the willingness to engage in community. And that means the academic community, the co-curricular community, the social community, that you are willing to give of your talents both in and out of the classroom. All right, so what are the major career paths post-Tuck? Well, there's a variety of different things that our students do. If you go onto our website under MBA and careers, you can actually find the employment report. You can also see a little bit more about where our students go. If you go to the class profile, you can also see some exact percentages. What I would say is students go everywhere. So you'll see students going into consulting. We'll see students going into financial services, including investment banking, private equity, those kinds of things. We see entrepreneurs as well. We see people going to consumer packaged goods companies and technology. So some of the top employers you'll see, well, certainly the big consulting firms. You'll see McKinsey, Bain, BCG. You'll see Parthenon. You'll see Deloitte. You'll see a lot of different types of consulting. You'll see places like Amazon and Google and PayPal. You'll see certainly the big investment banks, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, places like that. You'll see companies such as Target and Cargill and John Deere and General Mills. We had a student who interned this summer at Tesla. You'll see students who go out and are entrepreneurs. If you go to our website and search for the word Zippity, Z-I-P-P-I-T-Y, you'll see the story of two T-17s who started a company while they were doing their first year project and decided when they graduated that they wanted to focus on that. So we have a wide variety of things our students do. And certainly one of the things that you want to keep in mind is, what are you excited about? What is it that you want to do? And do you understand what you need to get there? Okay, so we have another question now. What is your view on getting a recommendation from not only a direct manager, but also a coworker who has more experience but the same title? Well, this is where you need to use some judgment on who is a good person to get a recommendation from. And the point here was, would this give a more holistic view? It will depend slightly on your work experience and where you've been and what you've done. We always want professional recommendations to the extent possible, because we're really looking for your feedback. We would prefer, or professional feedback, we would prefer not to get academic recommendations, because we'll see your transcripts and that's going to tell us about how you performed in the school. So professional recommendations are requested. We would like your current supervisor, because your current supervisor has the most recent picture of you and hopefully big picture perspective of you. There are sometimes reasons why people cannot ask their current supervisor. If that's the case for you, simply explain that in the optional essay, which is truly optional. We do not expect you to answer the optional essay if you don't have anything to say. But if you do have something to say, like you want to explain your recommendation choice, please do that. Okay, so let's assume that you've got that first one set with a direct manager, and now you're thinking about who your second person is going to be. It can be a variety of different people. If you've worked at more than one business, it might be helpful to give a historical perspective on your progression. So let's say you've worked at 2 places. Can you go back to your previous supervisor, or in another group, for example, and go back to a previous supervisor and ask for a recommendation? Do you want to ask a coworker who can give a different perspective? If you do that, I think it's important that they be a senior coworker, that they are not just a colleague and a peer, but someone who has greater experience and may be in a training or a supervisory role, or at least have a bigger picture perspective. And it would be important to understand what your relationship is with that person, so we understand what they contribute. We do ask the recommenders to describe that slightly, but it might be, if you elect to choose somebody who might be slightly non-traditional, it would be good to briefly explain in the optional essay why you selected that person. Now, a couple things you might want to consider is how this will appear to the admissions committee. So let's say that you have 2 different work experiences, and you've worked at one company for 2.5 years and another company for 1 year, and the 1 year experience is your current one. Well, definitely we'd like to see somebody from your current employer. Again, if you can't do that, please explain. If you give us 2 recommendations from your current employer, but do not give any recommendations from the employer that you were with for a longer period of time, that may raise a question in our minds. So again, consider that, keep that in mind. If there's a reason why you elected those recommendations from your current employer and not from a previous employer, and you think it might raise a question, please explain. So we're not thinking that perhaps you left under difficult circumstances, that we understand why. The business closed. I've never had one specific boss, and so it was harder to get that person. There might be a variety of different reasons, but let us know. And don't ignore your past history. So keep that in mind as well. Okay, so I think we got most of that question, and let's move on. Okay, so the next question, are there scholarship opportunities considered for every round? Every applicant who is admitted to Tuck is also considered for scholarship opportunities, and we do look, while certainly the scholarship budget is not endless, we do look to offer scholarships where we can. And we do have scholarship opportunities considered for every round that we can. So when there's not a separate application process, when you apply to Tuck, you also will be considered for scholarship. That is automatic. So hopefully that explains. You may also want to go to our website and look under, again, the MBA tab. There is a part on financing your degree, and to read a little bit more about opportunities for both scholarship and loans. Okay, so the next question is, can you speak to reapplicants? Do reapplicants typically apply the year following the initial application? Where do we see applicants most successfully improve their applications? So this is going to be dependent on you as a reapplicant. Do you feel that you're ready in the year following the initial application? Did you get feedback? We offer feedback frequently to reapplicants or to people who intend to reapply. And sometimes the feedback is gain more professional experience. We saw a lot of promise, but you are lower on the professional experience, and we haven't had a chance to see what your impact and influence is. So it will depend on what your feedback is, or in your self-assessment of where the strengths and weaknesses of your application are. So some people will apply in the year following the initial application. Sometimes people take a couple of years. I think both can be appropriate and helpful. The challenge here is understanding why you're applying now. Kind of goes back to one of the things I said initially, is understand why now for the MBA. Were you thoughtful about why this is the right time for you to apply? If you were told to gain more professional experience, did you go out and do that? Did you take on challenges? Did you take risks? Did you have an opportunity for impact? Did you grow in your understanding of what the MBA is? Where we see people most successful in improving their applications is when they do that great self-assessment, or also in combination with the feedback they may have received, and they take the opportunity to enhance their applications. Maybe they really thought about their goals more and understood better what an MBA can do for them. Maybe they really understood better why Tuck was the right place. Perhaps earlier they didn't show as much understanding of why Tuck was the right place for them. So when you do that self-assessment and you have an opportunity to think through why this and why now, that can be a great opportunity. Okay, so one of the things I want to do is take a break for a minute, and I have another poll for you. So I'm going to ask you to think about, do you plan on applying to Tuck? And I'm going to leave this open for about a minute while I take a break and drink some water, and then we'll go back to answering some more questions. Okay, so we're moving along. So the next question someone asked is, how does Tuck assist or support students in transitioning industries? Great question. So many of our students are transitioning in their careers, either to a different position or a different industry. And one of the things that I think is a strength of Tuck is, one, the general management curriculum, the core curriculum. So the first year, for those of you who are familiar with Tuck's curriculum, the first year is the core curriculum, where everyone moves through the essential aspects of business, the essential business functions and skills that you'll need to learn. And you work on those together with your study group, with your section, and you end up with a strong foundation in all those essential aspects of business, both hard skills and soft skills. That general management curriculum is one way that our students are well prepared for transitioning industries. You have a knowledge base and all those essential aspects of business. The second year, the electives allow you to dive deeper into the areas you're most interested in. So if you're interested in transitioning, you can focus your electives on those different skill sets that you want to develop for that new industry. You have opportunities like the first year project, which every student does at the end of their first year. And at Tuck, the opportunity to do this kind of hands-on experiential project to apply the learnings from the core to a course that allows you to tackle a real-world business challenge is tremendous. And one of the things that's really wonderful about the Tuck first year project is that you get to customize your experience. You get to choose the project you work on, you get to choose the team you work on. And that means if you want to target a specific industry, you can do that. And that is wonderful for career switchers, people who want to go into a different field. You can get experience tackling a real world problem in that industry. One of the other things Tuck allows you to do is we will source projects, but you can also source your own projects. So let's say you want to tackle an industry and there's no project that really fits the kind of thing you want to look at, but you've got an idea for one and you're willing to go out and do the hard work to try and source a project. You can do that. You source the project. You do need to get approval for that project from our first year project office. But if you want to do that, you can apply for that as your project for the first year project class. So that's another great opportunity. I think another opportunity, we talked about the fit for Tuck and how our students are so diverse and come from a wide variety of industries, but one of the things that they do add almost to a person is the willingness to share of their experiences and to engage in community. That helps transitioning students as well. If you want to try a different career path, most likely there is someone in your class who's done it already, and they're more than willing to share their experiences and their knowledge. They're more than willing to talk to you. And then our alumni network would be another great resource for people who are transitioning, because if the current students haven't done it, most likely there's an alum who does. And our alumni network is probably the most effective, not probably, The Economist ranks us year after year as the most effective alumni network in MBA programs. And the reason for that is when you call an alum, when you email an alum, they call back, they email back. They are engaged and they are loyal to the school. They are supportive of the school and the students, and they want to see the continued success of our students in school. So they will give of themselves. They pay it forward, and it's really ingrained in the Tuck psyche. So that's something to keep in mind as well as a resource for when you're thinking about, well, I want to go into this field. What kinds of things do you see and that you want to learn about? And most likely there is an alum who has done it. Okay, so another question, how much weight does the GMAT score have in the application process? Great question, and I talked about this before, but I want to make sure that you really understand it. It is a holistic process. We do not assign a certain weight to any particular category. And here's the reason is, we're looking for different skill sets and different things to offer. And one of the things we want that you offer, and one of the things we want to know is that you can succeed in the academic curriculum. How do we assess that? Well, we assess that partially from the GMAT or the GRE score, but that's not the only way we assess that. Sometimes, the academic progress is going to give us more of a picture of how you can succeed. Sometimes your work experience, sometimes you've done some postgraduate work, and so that's a great opportunity as well. So there's not a specific weight to the GMAT. What you want to do is submit your strongest score, and then submit your strongest application in general, and know that we will look at everything holistically. Okay? So I want to get to all of your questions, but I have one more poll I'm going to launch for about 45 seconds, and this is, what industry are you interested in post-MBA? So if you don't mind, we'll leave, as I said, we'll leave this open for about 45 seconds so we can get to more of your questions. Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so we have about 9 more minutes. We might go a little bit longer if we need to, but not too much longer. Okay, so the next question is, when will Tech release additional candidate-initiated interview dates? We release them when we have information from so most of our interviews are conducted by second-year trained interviewers, and so sometimes we're waiting to understand what their exam schedule is, what their availability is in December when we don't have classes for the most part, and so some students are traveling, some students are taking part in on-site global consulting projects, which means that they are traveling around the world. Sometimes they are preparing for recruiting or other things. So we're waiting for our students to get back to us on their availability for December. At this point, if you see gaps in the schedule, it is either because our students are in exams or it is the holidays here in the United States, and so we don't offer interviews at that time. Keep checking the website. We do often have students who or applicants who have to change their interview schedule, so their cancellations and opportunities open up. And then, as I said, we will be posting more as soon as we have a better sense of students' exam and travel schedules for late November and December. Okay. Okay, so the question is, let me see if I can understand this as best I can. Are readers looking for demonstrated skills and leadership experiences in Essay 1, given the other necessary elements, goals, why an MBA and why Tech, and a 500-word limit? We are looking for the story that you want to tell us. Basically, we are asking for what do you want to do, both short-term and long-term? Why do you need an MBA to do it, and why Tuck? And there is a word limit. Now, we're not going to stop reading at word 501, but by word 751, we're going to start wondering about your editorial judgment. So if talking about your leadership skills and experiences makes sense given the question, then that's what you want to do. You are going to have to decide for yourself what makes sense. This is my tip for you in writing your essays. Once you finish a draft of your essays, give your essays to someone to read without giving them the questions you were asked to answer. And if they can deduce from your answer what the general parts of the question are, then you've got a good sense that you answered the question directly. If they can't, you may want to go back and look at your answer, because most likely if they can't figure that out, you weren't being clear, or you answered the question you wanted to answer and tied in skills and experiences that didn't support the elements of the question. So you're going to need to think about how to craft your story, and as you're thinking about your goals, how do your demonstrated skills and leadership experiences play in? When you're thinking about why you need an MBA, how do your skills and experiences play in, and why Tuck as well? So you do want to keep that in mind. It's a judgment call, and we are not asking you. We're not asking you to be anything other than who you are. So you need to decide the best way to tell your story. Okay. So another question: is the selection process for international students separate? It is not separate. We look at the entire applicant pool, and we look at what you can contribute to the class, and it varies by person. So it is a holistic process, but we also compare people to the pool, and that's it. Because we have limited spaces, we cannot offer everyone who is qualified a spot. So we do have to understand how somebody fits into the larger picture as well. Okay, the next question: what is the best method of creating an impact during the interview, especially if asked about gaps in your professional resume? Well, I guess the best, I don't want to say creating an impact, because you need to simply tell your story. But what is the rationale for the gaps in your professional resume? What I like to do is encourage people to think about what's on their resume, and in this case, what isn't on their resume, but a question that somebody might logically infer from the resume, such as what were you doing between this time and this time, and explain what you were doing and what you gained from that experience, what you learned from that experience, what you liked and didn't like about that experience. So let's say the gap exists because you were laid off. This has not been for the past 7 or 8 years. There have been certainly ups and downs in the business cycles and industries that have not done as well, and industries that have done very well. And we've certainly seen layoffs and people having to change suddenly when they didn't expect to. So what did you do during that gap? What did you learn during that gap? How did you spend that time? Maybe you traveled, maybe you volunteered in addition to doing a job search. Maybe you searched for something else that fit what you were interested in more directly. Simply explain it to us and be able to do that concisely and clearly. And sometimes that is the challenge, particularly if you find it, that there's long pieces to it or you're not clear in your story yourself. Okay, so a couple more questions. I'm going to try and get through a few more before we end our time together. So question, how early can you schedule an interview? Do you offer interviews in the spring or summertime in advance of fall application submission? Great question. We recommend that you interview in the year in which you are applying. That means the admissions year, which is fall to spring, so September to April, May. So we do not recommend that you try to come on campus in the spring to schedule an interview for the following year. We are still interviewing for the current year as we have an application deadline in April. You can come to visit campus though in the spring if you're planning to apply the next year, simply to do a class visit, if available, to do a tour, to have an understanding of what the community is like, what the program is like. So we strongly encourage that. We also do summer visit days, which give you an opportunity to participate in a mock class, which is always fun. We do not do interviews in the summer. Because most of our interviews are done by second-year trained interviewers. They are not available during the summer. So interviews start in the fall, in the early fall. So if you're planning to apply next year, you will want to keep an eye on the visit schedule, which will open up probably the end of July or early August with interview time slots for the fall, and then schedule your time then. They do fill up quickly, but that is the best way of guaranteeing your applicant-initiated interview. Okay, so great question. How does one become a fellow after being admitted into Tuck? For example, Revers Fellowship. So I should explain what fellows are. We have second-year students who serve as fellows for our research centers and initiatives. We have several different research centers. If you go onto our website under research and faculty, I believe, you'll see the research centers there. And each of our centers hires second-year students as MBA fellows, and they use them in different ways. So we actually have 2 different Revers fellows. We have the Revers Center for Energy, and they hire MBA fellows. You would apply at the end of your first year, and this goes for all the fellowships. You would apply at the end of your first year. Each center has different criteria that they look at. One of the things they look at is demonstrated interest in the area that the center works in. We also have Revers Board Fellows, and they work with the Center for Business, Government, and Society. And what they actually do is they go out into the community. They work as non-voting members of nonprofit boards in the community. For example, you can find on our Tuck 360 blog post a blog about 2 of our students who worked with a group called Positive Tracks in the local community as Revers Board Fellows. So this is an opportunity, as I said, each center has different criteria they look at, and they use their fellows slightly differently, but you would apply at the end of your first year, and you can do this for all the different centers and initiatives, or almost all the different centers and initiatives. Okay, we're at 1 o'clock. I'm going to try and answer one more question, and then I'm going to say thank you so much for your activity and interest. You guys have been great. And let's see if I'm going to try and pick a question that answers many things for people. All right, so we have a good question here about what do we think about when we see someone with low quant scores or low test scores, I assume on the GRE or the GMAT, but getting an A in additional quant classes. This is where that holistic process comes into play. We look at everything holistically. So sometimes people don't do well in standardized tests. That's why we want to see your academics. Maybe you haven't done a lot of quantitative coursework in your undergraduate degree. So maybe you go out and take courses in statistics or microeconomics or financial accounting or something like that to prove that you have the ability to also build up your skill set in this and your foundation and your capabilities, because once you get to an MBA program, you're going to need those skills. That's wonderful. We like to see people who are willing to put in the effort and the energy. It's a great opportunity for you to learn something. It's a great opportunity to demonstrate to admissions committees that you're willing to work hard and put in the effort needed to be successful. And remember, we do look at it holistically. It is competitive, but so you do want to score the best you can on your standardized tests as one measure of your ability in a quantitative or verbal area, but it's not the only measure. So it is great to go take advantage of the opportunities in your area or the opportunities online to build your skill sets in different ways. Okay, so it has been great and wonderful talking with all of you. I'm going to end with the thought of thinking about where Tuck will take you. We have a personal, connected, and transformative experience. We develop leaders who will better the world of business and show those qualities of wise leadership. Tuck is a unique place. It's a wonderful place. It is a place that you will get the best sense of by visiting. So we strongly encourage you to take the opportunity that we give you to visit. You can find out more on our website, and if you are looking to apply, you can see the URL right there. Thank you so much for joining us today. Truly appreciated your questions and your thoughtful comments, and we look forward to seeing you at Tuck. Thank you.